White getting into it with Caitlin Clark. She's on the bench. It seems like she's getting really heated with her players. Caitlin's on the bench. They were talking about some sort of defensive scheme or something. Coach Stephanie White gets annoyed with this, gets Caitlin Clark out of there.
Footage circulating across the basketball world does not represent a standard disagreement. It shows a severe breakdown in team execution and communication during a live broadcast. Despite organizational efforts to minimize the situation, the internal tension has become highly visible. A public exchange where the head coach loses composure on the sideline while the primary playmaker responds with visible frustration creates an environment detached from professional standards. The atmosphere was severe enough that when a reserve guard was instructed to enter the game, her hesitant demeanor reflected the palpable hostility on the bench. This incident was not an isolated communication lapse, but rather an indicator of a systemic failure within a roster that appeared disconnected, struggling with frequent foul trouble, missed defensive rotations, and a lack of cohesive chemistry. When an explosive sideline incident occurs twice within a 10-day period, it ceases to be an isolated burst of competitive intensity and instead points to fundamental internal friction. The primary obstacle preventing this group from achieving consistency is not a lack of athletic talent, but a deficit in definitive leadership, leaving the team without clear direction when a game begins to slip away. In successful sports franchises, an internal hierarchy establishes itself naturally, regardless of age or tenure. Historical precedents show young, elite talents commanding absolute respect from veterans by their third season, effectively acting as the on-court general. Elite teams require a stabilizing anchor, whether that comes from a composed head coach who allows a superstar to play through difficult stretches, or a dominant player who commands the locker room while the coaching staff maintains a supporting role. Currently, this roster lacks a singular, unifying presence, causing players to look disorganized under defensive pressure. The intense public reaction to this sideline footage also highlights a discrepancy in how mainstream sports media handles the league. If a similar level of public animosity occurred between a superstar and a head coach in a men's professional league, it would receive continuous coverage across all major networks. Instead, traditional sports analysts have focused their criticism on independent digital creators and podcasters who drive the daily conversation. This critique ignores the reality that digital media is filling a void created by mainstream outlets, which frequently neglect regular game coverage until a major controversy arises. Independent platforms sustain daily engagement with the sport, whereas traditional networks often prioritize the league. Only when they can leverage storylines surrounding its most polarizing figures, the public fallout from this sideline dispute has divided prominent basketball figures. Several retired players and analysts argue that allowing such visible discord to spill onto the court damages team chemistry and sets a poor precedent. While some former champions attempt to dismiss the friction as standard competitive drive, exhibiting this level of vulnerability on the bench provides opponents with a psychological advantage. When rival teams observe public arguments between players and staff, it signals that sustained physical and mental pressure can disrupt the team's entire structure. Top-tier organizations maintain a culture resilient enough to withstand poor shooting performances, but currently, this squad is exposing internal vulnerabilities for the rest of the league to exploit. This lack of stability becomes more pronounced when contrasted with the performance of an expansion team like the Portland Fire. Playing with minimal external expectations, that roster operates with visible cohesion and competitive energy. Players previously regarded as overpaid or limited to bench roles are delivering highly efficient seasons due to the consistent confidence placed in them by their organization. Conversely, it remains highly unusual for a star-studded roster featuring multiple all-league selections and complete lineup continuity from the previous season to struggle to maintain a mediocre ranking. The coaching staff has displayed signs of tactical desperation, utilizing 11 different players in the first quarter alone. This frequent substitution pattern disrupts game flow and resembles developmental league management, rather than a structured professional rotation. Internal organizational sensitivity became evident when a fabricated report from a parody account claimed the head coach was facing immediate termination, prompting local media insiders to quickly issue coordinated denials. This high level of responsiveness to internet rumors suggests a lack of internal focus. In contrast, elite organizations such as the Oklahoma City Thunder have historically ignored sustained national media criticism regarding their playing style, choosing instead to respond with silence. The most effective method for shifting a negative media narrative is winning basketball games, rather than launching public relations campaigns or issuing statements to reassure the public of locker room harmony. Consistent, decisive victories against primary rivals would quickly shift public focus away from sideline disputes, whereas defensive media management only highlights internal insecurity. The star player attempted to defuse the situation by issuing a statement asserting that external commentary is disconnected from reality, emphasizing that her relationship with the coaching staff is defined by mutual loyalty and competitiveness. Despite these assertions, prominent analysts have publicly expressed exhaustion regarding the recurring frustration displayed on the court. Furthermore, opposing teams have systematically targeted the young guard defensively, utilizing isolation plays to induce physical fatigue and reduce her offensive efficiency. This defensive vulnerability is exacerbated by a tactical scheme implemented by Stephanie White, which emphasizes constant switching on screens. This approach frequently leaves smaller guards mismatched against larger opponents, forcing players who are not elite isolation defenders into unfavorable positions. This strategy has drawn significant criticism from viewers and analysts alike, who point to a lack of structured offensive plays designed to generate open looks for the primary scorer, describing the overall offensive system as disorganized. However, advanced analytical data indicates that the player's individual defensive net rating remains near the top of the team, despite being isolated 3 times more frequently than any teammate. This statistic suggests that structural systemic issues, rather than a lack of individual effort, are responsible for the defensive breakdowns. The organization faces a critical window to resolve these tactical deficiencies and internal friction, as the upcoming schedule features a highly anticipated rivalry game against a dominant opponent. This matchup will feature 2 generational talents competing directly, serving as a definitive test of whether the team can unify its approach or if the internal strain will lead to further competitive decline. Entering a high-profile national broadcast with fractured chemistry and structural confusion risks a decisive defeat. The intense competitive drive within the locker room will either serve as the catalyst for the team to stabilize its execution, or it will accelerate the breakdown of their season. The structural damage from these ongoing tactical blunders extends far beyond a single defensive rating or a few viral clips on social media. When a coaching staff fails to establish a consistent, predictable environment on the floor, the players begin to internalize that chaos, leading to the exact type of visible resentment that boiled over on the bench. In professional basketball, trust is not an abstract concept. It is built through repetitive execution, knowing exactly where your teammate will be when a play breaks down, and understanding your precise role within the system. When a team is constantly shuffling through experimental lineups and forcing unnatural defensive coverages, that foundational trust evaporates, leaving individuals to try and solve systemic problems entirely on their own. This self-reliance on the court inevitably manifests as bad body language, frantic decision-making, and a complete breakdown in communication during high-pressure moments. The upcoming battle against the Atlanta Dream is no longer just another regular season game on the calendar. It has officially transformed into a defining litmus test for the entire organization's leadership. This matchup presents a brutal reality check because their opponents possess one of the most physically punishing, disciplined rosters in the league, specifically designed to exploit teams that show even a single microscopic crack in their armor. If the coaching staff enters this contest with the same indecisiveness that led to using 11 players in a single quarter, the game will be over before halftime, turning a marquee rivalry into an embarrassing national broadcast. The intense pressure of this specific rivalry means that every single mistake, every sigh on the bench, and every missed defensive rotation will be magnified 1,000 times over by both the fans and the media. It forces a harsh ultimatum onto the franchise. Either they lock in, establish a definitive on-court identity, and play unified basketball, or they allow the outside noise to permanently fracture the locker room. Beyond the immediate tactical adjustments, the front office must also confront the long-term cultural implications of how they manage their superstar asset moving forward. Protecting a generational talent doesn't mean sheltering them from hard coaching or public criticism. It means providing them with a stable, elite framework that maximizes their unique skill set while masking their natural developmental weaknesses. History shows that the greatest players in basketball history only reached their championship ceilings when paired with an organization that possessed the organizational courage to implement an uncompromising standard of accountability from top to bottom. If the franchise continues to operate in a reactive, defensive panic every time a social media rumor gains traction, they create an environment of fragility that trickles down directly to the players. True stability is achieved when an organization remains completely unfazed by the public discourse, allowing the work on the practice floor and the results in the win column to dictate the narrative. Ultimately, the resolution of this crisis will depend entirely on whether the individuals inside that locker room can transform their intense competitive frustration into a cohesive, driving force. Sideline arguments and passionate disagreements are entirely salvageable, and often even healthy. if they stem from a shared uncompromising obsession with winning at the highest level. However, that fire only becomes constructive when it is channeled into execution rather than public defiance, requiring both the head coach and the star player to actively meet in the middle. The coach must design a scheme that respects the realistic capabilities of the roster, while the players must execute those directives with absolute discipline, regardless of how frustrating the game becomes. If they can successfully bridge this gap, this viral confrontation will eventually be remembered as the uncomfortable turning point that sparked a legitimate championship culture. If they fail, it will stand as the opening chapter of a massive, highly publicized collapse.